Good morning, Seth.
Good morning, Appa.
Good morning, Ezra. Good morning, Levi.
Good morning, Levi.
So our morning routine during our 14-day quarantine consists of our children running into our bedroom and waking us up, and then all of us going out to the living room and kitchen. And Ezra likes to use his step ladder to turn on all the lights everywhere. And when Seth was born, I didn't have enough breast milk, so I was looking all over for a soy formula, as our family, we prefer plant-based diet. And it was really hard finding soy formula that was non-GMO and organic at the same time, as much of the soy out there are all genetically modified these days. So I finally found it, and so we started Seth on it 5 years ago when he was born, and supplemented with breast milk, of course. And then when Ezra was born 3 years ago, we did the same route with him. And then when Levi came, of course he was on cow's milk in Korea, but we gave him the soy formula and he seems to have no problem adjusting to it, and it seems like he really likes it, so that was a pleasant surprise.
Okay, this is for Levi.
Yay!
This is for Ezra. This is for Seth.
So during our 14-day quarantine, it became a bit challenging for us, as we can't hang out with any of our friends and we can't go anywhere. So especially rainy days, it got really hard for us. So one day when it wasn't raining, the night weather was super nice, we decided to take the kids out to an empty parking lot, and the kids found a whole bunch of dandelions. I saw that Ezra plucked one and gave it to Levi, and it seems like Levi had no idea what to do with it.
Ezra 가져. 나미리 꽃 있어, 꽃. 호 해봐, 형아처럼. 형아처럼 호 해봐. 저기 형아도 호 하네. 나미리도 해봐.
One time it was really cute because Ezra kept trying to blow on the dandelions, and then it was very dense, so it wasn't blowing off. So he plucked the whole head off the dandelion and then he just blew it in the air, and I thought that was really cute.
It's not raining today, but starting from tomorrow, I think we're supposed to get 7 to 8 straight days of rain. So we decided to come out. That means next 7 to 8 days are going to be very hard. Because we're gonna be indoors and he's gonna do a lot more crying, so.
For snack time at our house, we try not to do sugar or anything like that. So our favorite snack is probably veggies and fruits, and also homemade popcorn. And one of their favorite snack that they like is edamame.
Baby soybeans in the pot. You just steam it for about 4 minutes.
Most soybeans are genetically modified, so our family, we try to look for non-GMO and also organic soybeans if possible.
So how you eat these, you have to pop these, you squeeze the fingers on the bottom, and then the beans pop out like this. So you pop it into your mouth. Yummy.
Ezra, 나미라.
여기. Boing. Boing.
You have to pop.
Oh, you have to pop, 맞아요. You have to pop. Good job, Seth.
나온다.
Good job.
상쾌해요. 애기한테 너무 많이 주면 안 돼요. 애기가 어떻게?
애기가 다 입에 집어넣고 다 뱉어요.
Levi's mouth is full, and he doesn't know how to pace himself. So he'll get a bunch of food, and then he doesn't know to swallow it, and then he ends up spitting it out. So we have to pace his eating.
The next section that we're going to share, it's a bit difficult for us to share, but we decided to do it so that we can be very transparent and realistic at the same time. Many of you who are watching our videos, I think, might be interested in adoption. And so when you get to our point of bringing the baby home, and then during the transition and adjustment period, when it gets very, very hard, you may be thinking, what's wrong with us? What's wrong with our child? Are we the only one going through this? Because we kind of felt that way. And we want you to know that you're not alone. And honestly, during the grieving process, the things that happen, the last thing you want to do is go out and grab your camera, but we wanted you to be very realistic about this. So when we first picked Levi up from the agency, the first 2-3 days we were in Korea with him, he didn't grieve at all except for the nighttime crying. And we thought it was almost strange because we were like, why is he not looking for his foster mom? Why is he not crying? He was just so pleasant, and there's grieving process. And I think that was like he was in denial phase. When we came home, the first 2-3 days he was fine. He was just playing with his brothers happily. Of course, the usual baby things that happen, but nothing much. But then from that day on, it started getting very difficult for us. The first thing that we ran into, of course, as we shared in episode 2, that he wasn't sleeping at night. The first couple nights, he was waking up maybe 50 plus times a night. Then when we came home, he was waking up 8 plus times a night. And it would just be a scream cry or just wailing cry, whatever it is. And I was getting only 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night. And with David staying home for 2 weeks for the self-quarantine, that was a blessing because then I could sleep during the day for a couple hours. But it's not a quality of sleep, right? The kids are constantly running in and waking me up, but still I got to rest some with David at home. But when he had to go back to work eventually, that became very hard for me. And then the next issue that we ran into was like food obsession and hoarding food, okay? So Levi, during 3 meals a day, the meal times, he is eating maybe 4 or 5 times more than his brothers and probably like 2 times more than adults. And another thing that he does is anytime there's food, he has to just gorge everything in his mouth. And it's almost like he's starving, but he just ate so much, right? So he'll eat really fast and then he'll get down the high chair, but then while the rest of us are eating, he'll keep coming back like, 4, 5, 6 times. And he wants to eat the same amount, if not a little bit less, again and again and again. And also we give the food to Levi and his 2 brothers, and I always gave Levi double portion because I knew he was going to eat a lot. But his hand or his spoon, whatever, would always, even though he's got a full plate or bowl in front of him, he would always reach out and eat his brother's food first before even touching it. He would just save his food, right? The other part was whatever is placed in front of him, as I shared a little bit before, that he would have to eat everything as if someone's coming after him and they're going to take his food away. So then he stuffs his mouth, he can't chew, so he spits everything out, and it was just a hot mess. So now we're teaching him how to pace by just giving him one at a time, and when he finishes chewing and eating, then placing more food in front of him. So that's one area that we've been having some issues with. So the next issue we ran into was Levi's constant biting, hitting, and pushing his brothers or even me and David.
나미리 왜 때렸어요? Oh no, it's time for a timeout. It's time for a timeout.
If things don't go his way, he constantly does this. And in the beginning, we feel bad disciplining him. And our definition of discipline is we have a timeout spot for all 3 boys, and that's where they go for a timeout.
사람 이렇게 때리는 거 no, 좋지 않아요. 이렇게 때리는 거 no, 좋지 않아요.
In the beginning, we felt bad disciplining him, you know, like he just got uprooted and he's grieving, but it came to a point that where if we don't discipline him, then Seth and Ezra, they're thinking, oh, it's okay to do that, you know, and still we don't get into trouble. And also that with children, if you don't discipline them from the beginning, you try to fix it later on, it's almost impossible to do it. So we knew we had to be consistent and firm with him. So the next issue, and possibly the most stressful issue for me, was the constant whining and crying. You know, he's grieving. This is all very understandable. In fact, if I put myself in his shoes, even as an adult, if I was uprooted where I am now and thrown with a complete strangers, I would be resorting to all kinds of stuff too. So all day long, you know, this constant sound. For moms, this is like the most stressful sound when your kid cries or whines. So mentally and emotionally, it's just so exhausting and draining for me. And as soon as he starts, my heart would just like shut down because I knew this was going to go on for however long again, and just draining in every way, that I finally just picked up the phone and called one of the adoption counselors and spoke with her like I feel like almost 2 hours. And she assured me that this was all very normal transition period for all adoptees. And in fact, she was like, you know, he's actually doing better than some of the other kids, so you should feel better about that. She said wait at least 6 months to see any major changes, and she said there's no other formula for this except for the time, right? So all we can do is just wait it out for 6 months and just survive day to day and just pray.
I was also very relieved to hear from the counselors that these behavioral issues that we were seeing were not unique to our own, but that other adopted families also go through the same process, and that with time we should see an improvement in these challenging behaviors. Even before adopting Levi, Esther and I had conversations about what to do if we ended up with a difficult child, one that would have behavioral issues that would be very challenging for us, and a child that would bring grief and pain to our hearts. And we had always concluded that no matter what, no matter how difficult the situation, that we would always unconditionally love this child and care for him. Our belief system is rooted in the scriptures, and in Ephesians chapter 1 verse 5, it talks about how we are all adopted into God's family. And you know what? When we are adopted into God's family, He adopts us for eternity. So He's in it for the long haul. After our 14 days of quarantine, it was time for me to get back to work. And we have a small private practice, a family practice, and we have 2 physician assistants. Because we are primary care providers, we are in the front line of diagnosing and treating patients with a variety of illnesses. Because of the rise of COVID-19, we began implementing telemedicine with our patients. During the telemedicine encounter, if we felt like the patient possibly had coronavirus, we would refer them to a drive-through testing center, or sometimes to the emergency room for testing if we felt it was more urgent. However, the problem I was running into was that many of my patients who were sick, when they went to get tested, they were turned down because there were not enough test kits, and so they would only test the very, very sick patients. We were getting all frustrated with the situation because I felt like the best way to flatten the curve faster as a community was to do aggressive testing. And so we decided to test coronavirus patients in our parking lot. Of course, Esther objected a lot to this idea because she didn't want any of our office staff or me to become exposed to the virus. But eventually she gave in, and however, she wanted me to be fully protected, so she went out and bought a full-out hazmat suit. And this thing, when I first saw it and opened it up, and I was like, whoa, this thing is serious. Like, it's got a helmet with oxygen tube connected to it and 3 oxygen filters, and it even had thick yellow boots, and I felt pretty safe inside. I couldn't do it myself, so I had my medical assistant help me get dressed each time. Years ago, when I was graduating from med school, I knew I would be entering into a field where I would be exposed to a lot of different medical situations, but never in my life did I imagine myself in a situation like this. Because I had made the decision to start testing for COVID-19 in our office, Esther and I felt like it was no longer safe for us to live together as a family. So we were discussing the different options, and the most ideal option would have been for me to leave and stay at a hotel. But the problem with this was that Levi was still in the grieving process, so he was waking up frequently throughout the night. So Esther was only getting about 2 to 3 hours of sleep at night. So during the daytime, she had absolutely no energy to take care of 3 energetic boys. The second option was to hire a babysitter, but because of the coronavirus restrictions, we were having difficult time finding any babysitter. The third option was for Esther's parents to come and help with the kids, but they had already helped us for the 2 trips to Korea for our adoption for approximately 2 weeks total time span, and so their farm in Tennessee was getting neglected, so they had to stay in Tennessee. So the final option was that Esther take the kids and drive up to Tennessee to stay at their farm, and we felt like that was the most reasonable plan.
So before leaving for Tennessee, I went grocery shopping to about 5 different grocery stores, including the Korean store, and I cooked and washed and prepared all the food for David so he can have his lunch and dinner while we're gone. So I had to call my parents. You know, they live 3 hours away from here. We're in Atlanta, they're in Tennessee, and I had to call them and ask them to come and drive with me because, you know, the last place that Levi got separated from his foster mom was right in front of the car. Or actually, we took him, you know, in the van. And so since then, he has been having a very high anxiety when it comes to, you know, car rides. So he'll be fine the first 5-10 minutes, but then after that, he will start screaming and crying nonstop. And so I knew with 3 kids and Ezra starting potty training, I knew I just could not do it alone. So they came and my dad helped me pack everything in the car. So my parents, where they live in a very secluded place in a mountain, and the closest grocery store, it's about 45 minutes to about an hour. And especially with COVID, like I did not feel good about going out to the stores anyway. There's no Instacart, by the way, out there. I looked and they don't deliver any food up there. So I made sure we took, you know, a whole bunch of food and fruits that they don't grow on their land. So we had a lot of stuff. The car was packed to the max.
갑니다. Ezra, 이거 해요.
우리 모두 코로나 걸리지 않도록 주님께서 특별히 역사해 주시옵소서. 예수 이름으로 기도합니다. 아멘.
So after we loaded up the car, we had our prayer and then we were off to Tennessee. So during the trip, we stopped by the rest area because the kids were getting so restless in the car. And especially Levi, he was just crying nonstop. So we got out and then the kids, they just started wandering around and then they were playing with the rocks, you know, like plucking the grass. And so we just let them play and run around for about, I don't know, like half an hour. And then we finally headed home. It usually takes us about 3 hours, but this time it took us more than 4 hours to get there. And but I'm so happy that we finally made it. So we'll see how the next how many weeks go without David.